Assalamu alaikum. My name is Hassan Chehem.
My name is Hayla Saad.
Hayla and I are part of Afar Youth Association. We want to start off by thanking AfarForum for allowing us and inviting us to participate in this year's virtual AfarForum conference. As you all know, this year's theme is Afar culture. And so for this topic, we decided to give the youth perspective on this important topic. And so we have titled our presentation, Afar Youth, the Custodians and Drivers of Afar Culture.
Speaking of culture, what is culture?
Sure. So I think when we look at culture, it's important to define not only what it is globally, but what it is, at the Afar community level. So simply put, culture is the characteristics and knowledge of a particular group of people encompassing language, religion, cuisine, social habits, music, and arts. So I think in our community, at least, when it comes to culture, we always think of the dress and then the gold that the women wear in our community, as well as Afargile, Barimoy, Lale. These are all parts of culture, but when it comes to culture, that's what we zoom on as a community. Culture is more than that. As I said, it's about your upbringing. It's about how you engage elders in your community. And a very, very big part of Afar culture is fi'ma. The idea of creating an institution with people who are your age. That's very unique and important in Afar culture, as well as Absuma weddings. You can look across the African continent, especially across Horn of Africa. This is something that's unique to Afar culture. This is one area that we, I think as a community, have not necessarily moved away from, but have in some ways evolved. I don't know if that's the correct term to use or not, but yeah. So Hila, another part of this topic is the idea of unity. So what is unity?
Unity, generally speaking, is a group of people coming together for a common or shared purpose. For me, unity within our community's context would be Afario. So regardless of which land you live on or what you identify with, it's a matter of sticking together and supporting one another for the sake of Afario. And unity can be seen in different ways, but within our context, traditionally, I've seen unity within people coming together for marriages or childbirth or the 40th day after a woman gives birth or someone passing away. That was traditionally, but in more modern days, we've had that, but also fundraisers, parties, protests, summer gatherings, amongst other things. But unity can also be seen as Inkitino. So we are one, basically, regardless of other factors that may divide us, we can still come together and unite as just being Afar. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I like that you brought up the Afario. I think that's a big topic in our community that we've always talked about, but never really defined and dissected, what it means to have Afario, right? Mm-hmm. So I think simply put, the idea of Afario is the idea that we're one people. We're in 3 different countries, but we're one people, that we have the same culture, we have the same religion, we have the same language, and that's something that unifies us. And if someone who has Afario is someone who is willing to look across the board and say that that's my brother, no matter where they're from, Mm-hmm. It's also the idea that me, as someone who was born in Djibouti, could look at a child in Aisaita and say, like, I feel for that kid. Like, that kid is, he could be my child. And so the idea with Afario is, I think just kind of having pride in who you are, as an Afar person, having pride in your identity, having pride in your culture, having pride in your language. And I think if we all had a little bit of Afario, I think we could go a long way as a community.
I would agree with that. Which this also connects to the next topic. What is solidarity?
Sure. I think in many ways, solidarity and unity are two sides, of a quarter, right? Uh, for there to be solidarity, there needs to be unity. But simply put, what is solidarity? If I was to define it, I would say that solidarity is an awareness of shared interest, objectives, and standards, and sympathies towards a sense of unity of groups and classes, right? To have solidarity with someone is to have empathy with them, is to sympathize with them. But
Right.
mostly, I would say, is to have empathy in their struggle and in what they're going through in their life. It's what they're going through at the country level, at the global level. So, for example, right now, you can look across the whole world. There's a lot of issues that are happening across the world, and I'm sure you've seen some of the hashtags, Nigeria SARS,
Mm-hmm.
and so you can see people from all over the world sharing that hashtag, which shows that they're in solidarity with the struggle that these people are facing. And even to hit close to home, as you remember, last October, we started the
Yeah.
hashtag I stand with Afar people,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so because we shared what was happening in our community, the struggles that we were facing, we had people across the world, and across the Horn of Africa who were in solidarity with us. They were sharing the pictures, they were using that hashtag, which showed that they were in solidarity with the cause of our people. Um, and even of a more of a recent, I think, example of that is the flooding, in the Afar region. And I'm sure you've seen the hashtags on Twitter that was hashtag. Oh God, I'm having trouble remembering it. But it was a hashtag. I think it was like hashtag Afar need help. Actually, I think that's what it
Mm-hmm.
was. And so that was a hashtag that was shared by all nationalities of Ethiopia, right? As well as the broader diaspora community. But as I guess in examples of solidarity, as I mentioned, in our community, in 2019 when that Obno massacre happened, that was something that Afar people across the whole diaspora said, hey, this is happening to our people, and so we need to raise money to help these people. And so, as an organization, we were able to raise money and get donations from Afar people across the world, as well as when there was that flooding in our Djibouti. Everyone pitched in and helped out. As well as the famine in Assab. All these things, no matter where they're occurring, is something that every Afar person should be in solidarity with,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I think in this sense, to that the idea that Afar culture is our unity and solidarity, is that it's that thing that defines who we are, and it's that one thing that unites us. It's from birth to death, like we are Afar. This is the culture that we are raised in, and so that those are commonalities, across Ethiopia, Eritrea, Djibouti, and the diaspora.
That was well said. What would you say is the role of Afar youth in Afar culture?
Sure. I think you and I could speak to the importance of youth having a seat at the table.
Mm-hmm.
That Afar youth need a seat at the table. That they need more roles in the community. That they need to be entrusted, with the responsibilities of fixing the struggles that our community is facing. And I think as a community, and uh, maybe this is a bad cultural practice that we have as a community, is the idea that old people know better, that old people
Mm-hmm.
have all the answers, right?
Right.
And it's that the adults are speaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think when it comes to intelligence, when it comes to knowledge, that's not something that's always tied to age,
Right.
right? And it's also not something that's just tied to education. You could have a PhD and be the dumbest person in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you could have a basic education and be the smartest person in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But so I think the idea with this is that your age should not define how you can be helpful to your community. And so in that sense, the role of Afro youth and Afro culture, Afro youth should have a role in many things, but especially speaking about culture. So as you know, as Afro youth, we are born into this culture, from our birth to our death. Our culture defines how our mothers give birth, how she is taken care of. You mentioned Brotom, that's part of our culture too. The idea that a woman needs 40 days to rest and build up her strength, you know, And that's an important thing. And even science says that a new mother needs that time to recuperate. You know, as you know, in many Western countries, this is it postmortem depression?
Yeah.
Right? It's a thing.
Yeah.
And so the thing with this is that, you know, that's the time that, at least in our community, is that when a woman gives birth, her mother's there, her grandma's there, like everyone's there to aid, you know, in that process. And so that's part of the culture. And so from birth, you know, you get circumcised. You know, that's also part of the culture. And when young people hit a certain age, they're circumcised in a group. You know, those are your wada, your fi'ma. You know, this is something that you have experienced together, you know, and then that's part of the culture. The way that's done, you know, is defined in our culture. You know, the idea actually is that in the olden days, when a young kid would get circumcised, it's kind of terrible to say he would make his claim, but it's like itithia, right?
Yeah.
Say, you know, as they're cutting his, you know what, he would lay a claim to his absuma. Like he would say the name of the young woman that he would want to marry in the future. So that's a cultural practice that has somewhat died out, but it's still part of, you know, it's part of that from birth to death, right? And then, you know, when you hit a certain age, you join a fi'ma group. You know, these are your brothers. These are people who are going to take care of you, who are going to be there on your good days, on your bad days, who are going to help you out when you get married, right? And then into your old age, as you know, in many of our communities, like grandparents still live with you, live with the family. You know, they're helping you with your kids and stuff, and so that's part of culture too, right? As an example. And you know, as you get older, you know, the respect that we give old people, the way that we take care of old people, that's also part of our culture, you know, and the way that we bury them, all of that is tied to culture. And so, you know, one example I guess that I can give that's personal to me is that when my mother was pregnant with me, she had kidney disease, and after she gave birth to me, she wasn't able to raise me in that way. And so my aunt, her sister, took me and raised me and even breastfed me, you know, as a kid. And when you look at that as someone from the West, you know, that's just like, it's I don't want to say it's weird, but, you know, it's not something that's common here. And so, you know, if that was the case living here, then we would say that my aunt adopted me, right? And so, and the other thing about our culture is the idea of adoption. It's not existent, you know. And the idea is that there's always going to be someone who's going to take you in. Because when we think of family, it's everyone. There's no nuclear family.
Yes. Your community.
Right, your community. So I mean, I guess I should say that, you know, this is our culture, and these are in some ways small things, but these are things that make us who we are as Afar people, and these are things that we need to highlight. These are things that we need to share with the broader international community, because people will look and say, this is how the Afar people raise their kids. This is how the Afar people do this. And so I think that's very important. So what role do Afar youth have in preserving, maintaining, and modernizing this culture, right? I think one thing in our community is that we believe that culture is static, that it can't change, that it can't move, that it can't be dynamic, right? So as you guys know, Jamal Redo, may God rest his soul, famous Afar linguist, one of the men who is responsible for putting Afar to paper, to the Latin alphabet. Said that Afar people only exist because Afar language exists. So, you know, I think that's very important. It goes to you know, to that language is a big part of culture. It's something that defines who you are. And you know, as I said, it defines who you are, and it defines where you came from. So if you hear someone speaking German, and you know exactly the language they're speaking and where they're from, right? And Afar language is no different. And another I guess argument that we're trying to make here is that that Afar youth are and should be custodians, you know, of Afar culture. And by that, I'm not saying that Afar youth should have the responsibility of it all, and that, you know, but it's the idea that as a youth, you know, your whole life is going through this culture from birth to death, you know, and so you're living in it. And and I'm sure a lot of older folks who are, I don't know if you guys remember that from 2018, but a lot of the older people, I think, have this sense that a lot of Afar youth in our community are, that they need to sit down and wait for their turn, right?
Mm-hmm.
When in reality, that's not the case. You know, you look around the whole world today, youth are the drivers of major change within their communities, whether that's social, economic, and political. And so when it comes to culture, I think right now, as someone who's at this point in their life, I'm worried more about my children's future, not my own, because I am here right now. Like, I'm sure you can speak as a mother too, the importance of what your hopes and dreams are for your daughter, in terms of in terms of the culture, in terms of her knowing her identity, and as a young person, you want to preserve that. You want to be the custodian of that. You want to make sure that what's good that we keep, what needs to be improved that we improve, and what we need to get rid of, we get rid of, right?
Right.
And so by custodian is someone who guards, protects, and maintains, right? Someone who is a guardian. In another thing, I guess, is that Afar culture will always be there as long as we as Afar youth have a custodianship over it. As long as we are protecting, preserving, and modernizing, that it will always be there. And I guess one point I'd like to make is that we have this idea that of not wanting to change a culture, right? When you don't want to change something that needs to change with time, it dies out because no one is willing to follow it. No one wants to follow it because it's outdated, right? And also, you don't want to modernize too much because you kind of lose a sense of who you are, right?
A solution to what you're saying just sounds like being more collaborative, because it doesn't mean, like you were talking about, the youth need a seat at the table, things like that. Like collaborating, bringing both worlds together would solve a lot of what you're discussing.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually a song, that I posted the other day, and in there was a phrase that said, "Sita nilik umane nil marayota." As long as we are like this,
as long as we have each other, nothing bad will come to us.
Yeah, which is true. It really is, and culture is unity. Culture is solidarity. As if we spoke in one voice, if we acted in one way, I think that just goes to show that there could be some major improvements, in our community and in our culture. So I guess what I have to say for this is that take the time to learn the culture, to practice the culture, to preserve the culture, and to advance the culture, right? Afar youth are and should be the drivers of change in our community. As I said before, that when you look around the whole world right now, youth are the ones who are pushing for change in a lot of communities, and Afar community should be no different.
Right.
And we should have a seat at the table to help make those changes. Like many cultures, around the world, Afar culture has good and bad practices. I think that's one thing that we don't talk about a lot as Afar people, is that there are some outdated practices in our community that needs to go, and it's past its time, right? I think maybe this is not a big example, but a small example of this is like when I was growing up, is that back home, the idea that your neighbors have a role to play in disciplining your child, right? If your neighbor saw your child doing something bad outside, your neighbor could discipline that kid and your mom and dad wouldn't say anything. But these days, how dare you touch my child? And I think that just goes to the importance of, like, it takes a village, right, to raise to raise a child, and that's part of our culture, is that solidarity, it's unity, that we're all in this together. That if if I want good things for my own child, I should want good things for your child.
Right.
I think that's that one area that we need to get back to in our community. And as I said, more than ever, youth around the world are drivers of change within their own communities, and it must be true for our community. So, Hayla, let's dive into the broader Afar community. So what do you see as the role of Afar community?
Community much like you just said, community is everything to Afar culture. I believe it's a foundation. Um, from my perspective, there's also different stages of what community could be, and each have their own respective roles. So, for example, the immediate sense of community would be our own immediate families that we live with, and it's their role to teach us our language, our faith-based practices, and our basic traditional do's and don'ts. Then your larger sense of community would be the Afars within the city or place that you live in. And they have the role to almost reinforce what you've already been taught at home, but also continue the teaching within their capacity, whether that means like fi'ma, like you were talking about, or wadai, and teaching you what the wadai looks like or could be, whether it's the surati and ada visibly that you were talking about, or how to even do afar dances. So that's the next stage. And then after that, it would just be what you kind of described earlier, the global Afar community. So that would include like elders, neighbors, family members, anyone who basically knows your family almost becomes an extended family and sense of like global community, I would say. Um, and generally speaking, that's who becomes your immediate family almost, you know what I mean? So for example, like I was born in Canada, and I only knew teachers or disciplinary people as my parents initially, who would be teaching me everything and disciplining if need be. And then the first time I went to back home was when I was 6 years old. And all of a sudden, everyone could be disciplining and everyone could be like lesson givers, teachers. So my point is that experience was when I first realized like my family, my was brought in for the sake of being Afar. You know what I mean? So it was because it literally what you kind of described. So because I am Afar and because this other neighbor Afar family knows one of my parents, they will teach. They want to raise me alongside their children, or same as they do for their own children. So the disciplining factor, the teaching factor, basically that broadened my sense of community and what that meant to me.
Right.
So overall, what I'm trying to say is, I would say the role of the Afar community collectively is to maintain that sense of community, because I think that's something that we're losing as we go into larger cities.
Definitely. I think to echo that, I mean, that experience goes to show that, your neighbors, or your broader family felt the responsibility that your life and the improvements in your life, that's a responsibility, right? If they're seeing you do something bad that you shouldn't, or guiding in the right direction, that they
Right.
felt that, that they had the responsibility to discipline you when you needed it, and I guess coming from Canada, I'm like, you ain't my daddy, you ain't my mom.
Right.
It's definitely interesting.
So basically we've discussed what culture is, unity, solidarity within Afar context, identified the role of both Afar youth and community within the Afar culture. In that discussion, Hassan mentioned youth should be the drivers to maintain and modernize our culture. And I think one way that youth have actually been doing this is through social media. So what would you say is the role of social media within Afar culture? What has it been?
Sure. And I think when it comes to culture, especially like music and ada, like Afro people love that, and we really do. And this is one thing that I really appreciate about our community, across the diaspora and across the Amu, is the importance of culture. The idea that there's nothing else that looks like our culture, that it's a unique culture, and I really do truly believe that, and I'm sure you do too, right? And for those of us who are in the diaspora, like, we don't get to experience weddings every Thursday, back home, or the traditional like horra and the boita. Like, we don't see that, and so the only way we can see that is through YouTube, Facebook Live. These people when they post it on social media. Like, I feel like I'm experiencing this with them, you know, and so that makes me have more appreciation for my culture. And as I'm sharing those videos, my friends from this country are seeing that as well. And so there's that little taste of who I am as an Afar person, what my culture is as an Afar person. Um, and so I guess social media today can and does play a big role in letting the outside world, letting the broader international community know who we are as Afar people, what our culture is as Afar people. You know, whether that's barimo, keke, lale, or the traditional, you know, jewelry and the hair braiding that women do, and the knife that, you know, that men have. Like, this is part of our culture that is very, very, very easy to highlight, right? And so I guess what I would say is, if you want to highlight, if you're back home, you want to highlight, like, highlight our culture, start a YouTube channel, start a Facebook page, do a Facebook Live, let us watch. You know, we're all in prison right now, you know, because of coronavirus, and so this is a good opportunity to watch that and for you to invest in that. Another thing I'll mention is TikTok. All right, TikTok is this big social media platform that's taken over the world right now. And there's been an uptick in Afar youth joining this application, sharing our culture, sharing our music. And so this is also a good way, another platform that small things can go viral, right? And so if we started a Lale challenge or a Barimo challenge, you know, or Afro girls wore the traditional clothes and actually showed how to braid the hair, like that could go viral. That's something that other people would find interest in, right? So this is another way to show our culture. And lastly, Instagram. You know, we like to joke that all old Afar people are on Facebook and all young people are on Instagram. And there is truth to that. But I think in our community, there's a lot of judgment, right? And so especially for youth, and I think a lot of youth feel comfortable on Instagram. And so that's why we're all there and we're able to share ourselves, share our culture, our identity, and who we are. And so old people don't go and get an Instagram account.
Stay on Facebook.
Yeah. But I guess one
We're
thing,
joking.
right? No, we are. As you remember, Hela, Afro Youth Association, we used to have a Snapchat account. Every day, someone would take over and introduce themselves.
From a different part of the world.
Different part, right? I think we had people from students in Senegal, West Africa, Turkey,
Malaysia,
China, Malaysia. That was really cool. And New Zealand,
Australia.
Yep. And I think a lot of people found the family that they didn't know were in certain parts. Like, I didn't know I had cousins in
or just Afar youth. Like, who knew we had youth in all those places?
Right. And so, I mean, that just goes to show the importance of social media and not only connecting us globally, but also connecting and projecting our culture, I think, to the broader community. And I guess to close, Hela, you know, what is one thing that's missing in our community, you know, in terms of helping us push our culture globally?
One thing missing, I would say, supporting each other more. So to be more specific, I would want to say supporting our entrepreneurs more. So I think in general, Afars do a really good job of supporting people who include us. So maybe someone has a clothing line and they put a Afar woman on the shirt, or they have a bracelet line and then they put an Afar flag on the, you know what I mean? Like, so if another company includes us, we're very big on supporting them, but I don't know if we lift up each other as much as we could. Not that we're not, but as much as we could. Like, we do have, I think I know of one Afar YouTuber who speaks Afar in French, and we could be uplifting her more. Or there's an Afar girl from Ottawa who has her own juice company that she started. Like, you know what I mean? So are we uplifting and supporting existing entrepreneurs? And then on the other side of things, really pushing those who may have the idea, but haven't like planted the seeds yet. You know what I mean? Sorry.
No, you're fine.
And there's like one thing that we like, they may say it in other places, but in Toronto they say a lot like support local before global. So meaning anything that we could possibly do to support locally, you should do that before looking elsewhere. That's something that I'm trying to relate to what I'm saying about our community specifically.
Right. I think it in that sense, like our community, like we need to focus internally, right? We need to focus on internally building up our own economies, building up our own culture, building up our own identity. And you spoke about entrepreneurship, and I'm glad you gave the example, of those people, especially 305 Juice Bar, Zainab.
Yes,
That's
in
awesome,
Ottawa.
right? That's awesome.
And the girl I was talking about for the YouTube page is Amina in Belgium.
Yeah,
So these are just two smaller examples.
definitely. And I think to do that, I think on Afar Youth account we've shared a lot of their videos and every time they post. But to the broader Afar community, support them, right?
Yeah.
They're taking the time out of their life or their day to start something, to be someone, and these are things that we should push because their success is our success, right? And I guess to plug in as well, there's a Afar, a sister here in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, who she's doing like a cultural home decorations, I guess you could say. So she has like the artwork that has the sureti design, as well as the stuff that you can put your coffee and tea mugs on.
Right.
And I think she's even doing like jewelry and stuff. And so her, inshallah, we'll share a lot of this stuff on the Afar Youth page so that you can follow them. But I think to close, I think we might have gone over our time. But we want to thank you guys for giving us the opportunity to talk about this important topic and to share with you our ideas, our thoughts, and our views on this subject. Hayla, you have any final words?
Just thank you for allowing us this opportunity that we probably went over time.
Yes. You can find us on Facebook, Afar Youth Association, as well as on Instagram, Afar Youth. So thank you so much, and Hakaisuk.